This is episode number 34, featuring artist Mary Pettis. Welcome to the PleinAir Podcast from PleinAir Magazine, and I'm your host, Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we dive deeply into the world of outdoor painting, which is called plein air painting. For those of you who don't know, it's a French term, essentially means outside or outdoors. The French say plein air, others say plein air, but no matter how you say it, there's a huge movement of artists around the world going outdoors to paint. We call it the new golf. This show is all about the movement, the painters, collectors, galleries, the art. And this week's podcast is brought to you by the world's largest gathering of plein air painters, the PleinAir Convention, which is making history again this April in San Diego. You'll be part of the paint out and being out there with 1,000 other artists, and that's a world record breaker. So you can learn more at PleinAirConvention.com. It's my desire to see more people fall in love with plein air painting, and you can help by sharing this podcast with your friends. I hope you'll subscribe too. Hope you'll come back. Today's interview is brought to you by something new. It's kind of my recent opus. It's called Art Marketing in a Box. It's one of the biggest and best things I think I've done in my career. The idea was to create a tool to help artists market themselves, because I deal with a lot of artists. I teach a lot of art marketing, and a lot of them just have a hard time figuring it out. If they don't love marketing or they don't know what to do next, this is a complete system, a full year with a checklist, tells you what to do every month. Everything is written for you, produced, laid out. There's an online tool that helps you come up with special offers. It is a cool thing. You drop in your images, your name, your offer, and boom, you print it out or you send it out, and it's done. It's designed to drive business your way, build your brand, sell more paintings, generate consistent income, generate cash when needed, and get you invited into galleries. And you can learn more about it at artmarketinginabox.com. So let's get right to our interview with Mary Pettis. Well, we're pleased to have Mary Pettis on the line. Mary, welcome.
Thank you, Eric.
I'm so excited. I just have admired your painting for so long, and you're not only such a great painter, but you're also such a great teacher. So I'm really excited about this podcast.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So where's home for you?
I live in Taylor's Falls, Minnesota. It's right on the border between Wisconsin and Minnesota on the beautiful scenic St. Croix River.
Well, that explains the frozen waterfall painting that I saw on your website, which was just stunning.
Thank you. I've painted a lot of frozen waterfalls.
Well, you up there, you get about 6 weeks of summer. So if you don't get out in the wintertime, you don't get out at all, right?
Well, that's what people say. I love Minnesota. I love all the seasons and the clean, fresh air. And we jump in the river for about maybe 90 days out of the year. And so that's nothing to complain about.
Well, that's right. Well, I think, Mary, for the benefit of the people who might not yet know you, why don't you give just a little brief summary of what it is you do and maybe what makes you different?
Oh, well, I've been through quite a journey, but right now I am painting. I'm a plein air artist as well as a studio painter, and I'm very in tune with the land, I think, which is probably a result of my growing up on a farm in southern Minnesota and working the land and feeling really in tune to the seasons. And I think all of that I bring to my art. And now I've been thinking a lot about the abstract elements of painting and the power in the tools of line, shape, values, and colors, edge and texture, paint handling, all that. And so I guess I'm just in the middle of it, like most of us are.
It's never ending.
That's true.
So let's kind of start with the journey. Let's just touch on a few highlights. Give us a sense of when this painting journey began with you.
Well, I guess it started in college. I wasn't sure what I was going to major in, if it would be music, drama, or art. And I was in Macbeth at the same time that I was in painting class, and I painted a still life. And at the end of Macbeth, all I had to show for it was a program. But after the painting class, I had a still life, and I thought, oh, wow, I'll be very practical and be an artist. So I thought that was the lesser of the evils of my other choices. But I laugh in retrospect at the shock that my parents felt when they found out I was not, in fact, going to be a teacher or get a good job. I was going to be a painter instead. So it started there, but then I saw an article in the American Artist magazine with Richard Lack, who I thought initially was a dead old master painter, and then I found out that not only was he alive, but he had moved back to the Midwest, back to Minnesota, and was teaching the old master style of painting. And my heart skipped a beat immediately, and I knew that I needed more. And so I tried to that sounded like something that would be a wonderful challenge, and that's what I wanted to do. And so I contacted him and was accepted on a trial basis. And I was one of the first 2 women students that he accepted at the time. So that was way back in the dark ages.
Well, wait. I got to stop you there because that's really a phenomenal story. First off, for those who don't know, Richard Lack was very much responsible for bringing new life to the, what would you call it, the realism movement, painting like the old masters. He was one of the really early ateliers to bring that back and focus on it.
Yes.
And so legendary. I mean, the man was legendary, and you had a chance to study with him. So maybe let's stop and touch on that, because it appears that it's completely different than what you're doing now.
Yes.
Because looking at your work, your plein air work now, it feels completely different than the perhaps what one might perceive as the tight realism that Richard Lack probably would have promoted. What were the primary things that you were able to take out of that time with Richard Lack, and how much time was it?
Well, I spent 3 years there.
Wow.
If I include the trial period that I had during the summer.
Lucky you.
And I was very fortunate. And I know that Richard Lack was told by his teacher not to have women students, which gives you an indication of how old I am. So I'm 53.
Who was Richard Lack's teacher? Do you know?
Ives Gammell.
Oh, it was Ives Gammell. All right.
Yes.
All right.
And yes, from the Boston School. So we have a direct student-teacher link to the French masters, Jerome and David.
Yeah, so we have that in common, because I studied initially with a guy who studied under Gammell. And so we were each one generation removed from Gammell.
Oh, yes. I think in answer to your question, I believe the probably the most beneficial thing that I gained from that experience was learning accuracy in drawing and draftsmanship. And I learned the sight-size method, of course, and not being satisfied with inaccuracies. It helped me to see subjects flatly, and I started to see the beauty in an arabesque line, which would have never occurred to me before, I think.
Wait a minute, that's a term I don't know.
Just that. Well, I remember I did some memory training. I did that for my final. Right before I went to Atelier Lac, I left college early, although I graduated with a double major. But I left with my senior project being memory training, and that was under the guidance of Richard Lack. And I would outline Titian and Velasquez subjects, and then try to memorize the outlines. And as I did that, I started to develop, I think, a sympathy for how beautiful the outlines were, and which is kind of connecting to what I'm doing today. A carryover is that there's a particular abstract beauty that is in the line, and now I have come to understand that there's an abstract beauty in shapes as well, how negative and positive shapes interact with each other. There's a beauty in color harmonies, and different color harmonies for different moods, depending on what our artistic intent is. So the, I guess, accuracy in what I am seeing and the ability to draw was an important thing. And the second big thing that the seeds that were planted at the Atelier were my appreciation of not just copying what we are looking at, not simply the visual impression, but looking for the beauty in the our that's underlying it all, that we can express through our personal and artistic temperaments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I want to go back and touch on something briefly. You mentioned sight-size painting. There are people who are new to painting who are listening to this. Perhaps you could touch on what sight size is, and I'm also curious, are you still employing sight size when you go out and do plein air painting?
No, not at all. Sight size is a tool that works in different ways for different artists. For me, it was valuable in those first years. But, and I know depending on what, I think, right now I think that it's more important probably to have the skill for relative measurement, but sight size means setting a subject up and setting your canvas up in such a way that you can use plumb lines and rulers and measuring tools, strings, to compare the exact measurement from what you're looking at to your panel.
So for the individual who might be unaware of sight size, let me just take this a little further. So imagine that you have the canvas right next to the head of your model.
Yes.
And you take a plumb line across the top of the head, across to your canvas, and you make a mark for the top of the head. And you take a plumb line, or maybe not a plumb line, but a line across the chin, or under the chin and across to your canvas, and you make a mark there. And you do the same with the marks of the nose and the eyes and so on, et cetera. So what you're doing is you're making the measurements exact to the model versus standing back and guessing the proportions. You're actually learning the exact proportions.
Yes, and that's a very valuable tool, I think, in beginning painting. But when I left the Atelier, I felt a little crippled because I felt that I couldn't, and this doesn't happen to everyone, I'm sure, but my experience was that I couldn't just sit in a restaurant and draw someone. I think had I stayed a couple more years, maybe I would have maybe learned to be more confident in that. But I felt that setting things up and measuring sight size was the only was the only way that I could get accurate drawing. And it took me quite a few years actually to break free from the feeling that was the only way I would be able to draw or paint someone. Uh-huh. So I believe that gestural painting and relative proportion study should go hand in hand with the sight size method for most painters. But it depends on our artistic intent.
Right.
But especially when we get out of doors, I'm no longer, well, I've been painting for 45 years, and like I said, I've been through a lot of different stages, but I am no longer interested in just in describing what I'm seeing. I'm more interested in the expression.
Interpreting what you see.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Yes. It's like Aristotle said, the aim in art is not to imitate the outward appearance of things, but their inner significance. And so I think about things like that a lot and think, okay, how do I get there?
Well, I was curious about that because there are a number of plein air artists who are doing site size now again. Yes. And Joe McGurl is the one that comes to mind. Joe has a frame and sets up, and I studied with Joe, and you have to get things exact, which is a really interesting discipline. So I was curious about that. Well, before we go into some of the other things that I know you want to get to right away, you said you've been painting for 45 years. Yeah. There are a lot of people who are listening to this who haven't been painting for 45 years and who are going through the struggle, trying to figure out, how to make a living, trying to figure out how to find their voice. Can you touch on some of the moments in your career that perhaps were altering in terms of how you ended up doing things, or perhaps things that where the light bulb went off and you went, oh man, I'm just completely, need to go in this direction. Anything come to mind?
I think that probably my first couple decades, I was just trying to make a living. I never intended that I would be the sole provider, but things kind of worked out like that. And so I always painted, but I would paint anything that anyone wanted. So I kept myself in paint, but I'm not so sure that the first, I think I wouldn't recommend people go through the 15 years or 20 years of fumbling around like I feel like I did.
Well, how did you fumble around?
Well, I ended up painting commercial illustrations and wildlife art and painting for publishers. And I opened up a couple different galleries over the years. And anytime anyone walked in the door with any project, I would say, yep, I can do that. Sure. a wedding party in the style of Monet. Sure.
Well, you had to make a living.
Or your pet dog or your alligator or whatever, that it was all a wonderful challenge. And I loved the challenge of trying to render visible those things that people wanted hanging in their homes. And I never minded working with a color scheme or any of that. I was just, like you said, I was just trying to make a living. But I figured raising kids and continuing to paint would all be good, and taking that time out and would probably give me an extra, like taking 20 years off to raise kids would keep me young at the other end of my painting career, and I'll make it up on that end, which is what I feel like I'm doing now. So
did you took the time off to raise your kids, or you painted continuously through that?
I painted continuously, but it would be coming from the Atelier. I painted with thick paint and then sabled it all out and did a lot of detail. Even my wildlife paintings which is something that I could sell in the Midwest, were very fine technically. The paint. I remember having a painting come home because I didn't have the eyes on the blue-winged teal as they were flying by in a flock of 14, so I brought it back into my dining room and put the eyes on the blue-winged teal for my client. And so my point is that I would take probably 3 months to do a painting, 3 or 4 months to do a painting, and then I would sell it for enough to catch up on 4 months of mortgage and bills and then start the process all over again. But the paints were set up right in the dining room, and the kids would be playing piano or playing in the living room and cooking, the water boiling on the stove. And so I've been there.
So for the person who's listening to this, who's going through that journey of knowing you have to paint, once you get it in your soul, you have to do it. And yet the struggle between how you deal with raising a family, any particular advice?
I think just keep at it and know that we bring everything to the easel. Every struggle, every tear, every heartache, every joy, all the love that we've put in to our children or our elderly parents, or everything that we give comes back abundantly, and we can find solace in that. It all shows up in the easel if we stick with it.
All right.
One foot in front of another.
So the thing I'm really curious about, because you're such a fabulous painter, but also a fabulous teacher, is that I'd like to talk a little bit about the journey and the journey of becoming an artist and getting beyond the basics. First off, let's talk about mastering the basics. What advice do you have for people who are kind of beginning this journey? What should they be doing? Should they be going outdoors? Should they be doing in studio? What do you recommend?
I think the first thing is to get off on the right foot by finding a teacher who is an artist, who is painting in a manner that stirs your soul, who's painting in a way that when you look at their work, you melt. I think that's important to go and study with them if they're teaching. If they're not teaching, and you then go to artwork that stirs your soul and make copies of that artwork. But I think that's very important to get off on the right foot with an artist who works in a manner that you would like to emulate. Then I think you can cut through the chase a lot by that. And then secondly, learn the basics from a person like that. And then I always tell students, go outside, absolutely. And I'm a big fan of doing little paintings, little pochades or studies, 5x7, 6x8, and line them up. Do 50 and line them up along the baseboard or on the floor. And you will start to see what it is in nature that excites you, especially if you have the basics. Then go, and you're trying to find your voice. That's the time to go out and do, or that's especially the time to go out and do a number of small paintings, and put a timer on. Spend 1 hour in and out. Don't fuss. That's how you'll start to see those paintings that you like will have more powerful shapes, or have a beautiful line, or a gentler tonality, or a more powerful tonality. You'll find what it is that is a unifying theme. That's something that's inside of you trying to get out. If you're just copying nature is good to learn the basics of how to mix a color, how to make a painting. But once we learn how to paint, learning how to express oneself takes a little bit of inner work.
Well, I love the idea of a lot of small paintings and do them quickly, because you get to the point where you don't have time to overthink everything. Because
Right.
when we're first painting, and sometimes some of us, way into our careers, we're overthinking everything and we're not going from instinct. And I often tell the story, which I think makes the point about this, is I was camping with my family and I was just dying to go painting, and I saw a break and it was sundown, and I literally had 20 minutes to run over to the coast, paint this lighthouse, set up my easel, and paint in heavy blowing winds, holding the easel down with one hand and instinctively trying to get the painting down in probably 10 minutes time. And it turned out to be one of the best paintings I ever did, because there was no time to stop and noodle and think. It was just all about get the essence down in massive brush strokes. And it's still one of the favorite paintings I've ever done to this day because of that.
I have the exact same experience. And you asked me about what pivotal moments were along the way. And my story is that I was up north fishing and I was in charge of my little nephew. He was about 8 years old, and he wanted to go fishing and I wanted to paint. And I didn't like motors, so we rowed across the bay, and he set up, well, it took a while, but I got him all set up, and then I set up my little pochade box, and I was going to paint this little bridge that is on our favorite lake up there. And a storm started coming, and he was getting upset because the fish weren't biting, and he just knew that if we went across to the bay to this other spot that he'd catch some fish. And so I thought, well, okay, so pull in all the painting gear and pull in his fishing stuff. And I rowed to the other side of the lake. Meanwhile, the storm is getting closer. And so I said, okay, put your bobber in quick. The storm is coming. And it turned out I had about 40 minutes, which at that time was a long time because I was still painting little miniatures, trying to paint big and breathy, but they always ended up being miniatures. But in about a half an hour to 40 minutes, I had the best little painting I had ever done. And it was pivotal to me really thinking about how did that happen? Where did that come from? I finished it in the rain and rode back home. And, but there's something about that the miracle of turning off the intellect and painting intuitively. And then the more we do that, the more gratifying it is. And the more we start to see the direction that we are being called toward.
Well, you talk about Ruskin on your website. Yes. And some of his advice, and it kind of plays into what we were just talking about. Can you touch on that?
Well, I love Ruskin because he made me start thinking about mastery and the two different levels. It was first of all, there's the mastery of content, or our concept, and then mastery of the medium. And he separated those two disciplines, and I thought that was really a fascinating study. And so in Mastery of the Medium, he said we need knowledge of truth. Well, then, of course, what is truth? That's a whole hour in itself, or a lifetime maybe. And he says that truth of sentiment is more important than truth of facts. And so I thought that, okay, there's a whole, that was one of the first things that fascinated me about Ruskin, because if truth of sentiment, then all of a sudden we're not painting things. Well, what are we painting? And so Ruskin was one of the first people that really started getting me thinking in terms of the abstract qualities. How do you go from describing something to expressing how I feel about it? And then he said the means are through simplicity, mystery, a sense of insufficiency, like this shouldn't be enough to make that look like a tree, but it is. That kind of thing that happens when we're under pressure or when we turn off our brain. And then the ability to paint with precision and velocity. And I love that. That was a goal that got me thinking about not painting the drapery, but the flow of the drapery. not the vines, but the spreading of the vines, or the reaching of the limbs of a pine tree. So that's why it got me into thinking that the truth of sentiment might be painting that reach instead of the limbs at the proper angle. And then that was reinforced by other artists that I studied with, like Zhang Wengsun and Zhou Wang, when they started giving me permission. In my head, they were giving me permission to exaggerate, which was exaggerate the gesture, exaggerate the structural rhythms that I see in the landscape, find that the quality that I love, and subdue all the other elements. So, and just find the colors and the shapes and the lines that will point out clearly to my viewer, this is what I'm jazzed about. This is what excites me. So that was kind of one side of Ruskin. And then the other thing that Ruskin talked about in terms of mastery of the content, that's kind of that got me thinking about, what do I choose to paint? What is my aim? And do I want to just imitate things, or do I want to show my power? Like, look how great I am. I can get perfect recession, or I can paint this scene exactly before the light changes. Or am I looking to paint truth of, or beauty, or relation? Those are the kind of the steps that he went through, and it got me thinking about my purpose a lot. So that's me and Ruskin.
How do you know, though? You go out and you see something that you respond to, and you say, I want to paint in this spot. And so often we lose it. We intend to paint in that spot, but sometimes we forget what it is that excited us, and we're trying too hard.
Yes.
How do you know how to translate that into something that goes beyond technique?
Yes. I think the first thing is the exercise is to go smaller until we get it almost every time. So go as small as is necessary to get that first impression of what it is that inspired us to paint it. If we start to lose it, then to me that's a sign that the student is working on too large of a canvas, does not have a well enough trained memory to hold that impression, or there's a general fatigue that is setting in. The other thing is just a lack of understanding of how to translate what excites people. If they don't really understand beforehand, spend enough time contemplating what it is that excites them and how to translate that, then they lose that because they had a foggy idea to begin with.
So do you start then with a sketch so that you kind of nail it first? How do you do that?
No, I think just go straight in with paint. But that's what I do. I find that and that's what we all have to do. We have to listen to ourselves and find out what it is that separates us. Sometimes drawing out, or just if you're not a line person, having to translate it into line removes you one step from that emotional response. I'm one of those people, and so I find that I need to go straight into paint, lay in an armature, lay in the basic colors, and try to get it in the first 8 or 10 minutes. And if I don't, I wipe it out and I try to get it again. And then when I fall in love with my picture in the first, just a thin wash armature in the first 8 or 10 minutes, then I know I can continue. But I think it's really, almost more valuable than doing a sketch would be to spend more time contemplating and figuring out what kind of a person am I, what am I turned on by in this scene? And then maybe if you have a pencil in hand, write that down instead of try to do a line drawing of it. Say, I love this sweep. What if take time looking inward and be fully present and let all the noise fall away, and then in that zone we become a much better receptacle for the things that really matter to us in the scene that's in front of us.
I find it interesting you use the word armature.
Yes.
Can you touch on that?
Well, I think I use the word armature as kind of like a sculpture. Like a sculptor has a wire, begins with a wire frame, kind of, and I think I use an armature as that like a large band of light or dark that ties the composition from one side of the painting to the other, and then we hang the picture on it. So
you've just confused the daylights out of me and everybody else. So we need to probe that a little bit more. So when you're first beginning your process of laying down a painting, are you is your armature sketching out the scene and then building around it, or are you saying you're putting a couple of big strokes of light and dark in to kind of lay out the big shapes? Help us understand that a little bit.
Okay. I guess I'm more of a mass person than a line person, but it's a division of space with the masses. And so in painting, an armature is it's like a structural swash of paint that binds all the components into a whole. So it's like it connects the composition to the outer limits of the painting surface, like straight line letters like I, L, T. It's kind of the division of light and dark spaces, but it's the most abstract division of light and dark space that you can get, like the horizon and the sky. Two-thirds. Okay, my armature could be just one band of dark along the bottom 2/3 of the canvas, or it can be an L shape, or the eye, or the circle that Edgar Payne talks about.
In his composition book.
Yeah.
So are you, I'm curious, I have to probe this a little bit more, because, so when you're laying down light and dark, are you allowing the light to be your canvas and the dark to be the paint, or are you actually putting light paint in the beginning?
No. Good question. And this is all done in a wash. It's like a bister wash.
Okay.
It's a way to get there fast. It's
a thin wash with what?
Yeah.
Gamsol or terps or something?
Yep. Okay. Gamsol and whatever color is a tone that we might want to come through in the finished picture. It's a way to get there really fast. Mm-hmm. Okay. So squint down to the main values. If you squint down, I like to say it's what you would see if you put your painting out at the mailbox and you have no idea what the subject is, but you'll see a division of light and dark shapes. And it can be done with a 4-inch house painting brush on a 16 by 20, for example, just big, clean lines. This is where it's a way of toning the canvas initially with the bands of shapes, where the shapes are going to go before you even begin to put in a tree or a person or a structure. Okay. It's what you would see from the mailbox.
Okay. And by the way, while you're out at the mailbox, just go into your studio, grab a dozen or two, and just send them to me. I'll just take a look at them, and you might get them back someday. So why do you paint?
Oh, why do I paint? It feels like I don't have a choice. Huh? I think that it's a way of communicating. It's my way of staying in touch with humanity. I think art not only connects me to the past, and I know it will connect. I know, and I feel even at this stage in my life, I feel profoundly that it'll connect me to generations beyond me in the future. It's a way of communicating, and it's also painting connects me to my source and my inner self. So communication, I guess, is number one for me. It's a language that I've learned, that I'm learning, and so I owe responsibility to whatever reason it is that I was put on this planet. I think to get better at it, I'm just always drawn to trying to communicate better with this exciting tool.
So you talk about getting better at it. You said you've been painting for over 40 years.
Yeah.
What do you do to get better at it? How do you go from level to level? How do you continue to grow? Because it's real easy to get confident and say, I can nail that now and I can produce great paintings. How do you keep yourself motivated and moving to higher and higher levels? Because I think we all struggle with feeling stuck sometimes, feeling like, I just can't seem to get any better and I don't know how to get out of this being stuck in the mud.
Yeah. Wow. There are a lot of layers there. I think I always have to work on trying not to be jealous of those people who are painting now the same way they were when I was painting with them 40 years ago. I think, that would be so wonderful to just still be wanting to paint like Aldo Hibbard, and have mastered it by now. Then maybe I would have felt like I mastered it by now, or painting like, the Atelier artists, and just mastering that, do one thing and dedicate your life to getting great at it. But I haven't really found how I want to paint until about 6 or 7 years ago. I think I feel that I've always been, I've just always been thinking, I matched every color I could see. I recognize what you're saying. I say I've matched every color in front of me. I've captured the light. I've followed the fleeting effect. And it isn't what I'm after. I'm after something else. And so it's trying to find, what is this something else? And being able to let go of what is comfortable for me, that I, to not have the fear of letting go of what's working in order to get up to that next level. Do
you sometimes feel like you don't even know you're stuck? You're just comfortably producing things and, just going along, or do you intentionally really try to push your limits?
No, I think I've been through that many times where I've thought I was stuck, but then I learned over the years that that I just need to spend more time in contemplation or meditation, or trying to figure out go back to the source. What do I love? What do I really, really love? And isolate that. And then I go back and I get back on track again. But usually if we put it out there, an answer will come. A teacher will come. A book will come. For me, that happened in seeing. I felt like I was getting stuck, and then I saw the exhibition, my first exhibition of Russian Expressionism at the Fleischer Museum in Scottsdale several years ago, and that got me unstuck fast. But the port put me down in a big hole of trying to figure out, oh no, why? That was the first time in all of my years of being an artist that I had the reaction that people always talk about. Oh, I was trembling and tears came to my eyes and I had an ache in the pit of my stomach. Well, I had that experience when I went to the Fleischer and saw their that first huge exhibit of Russian Impressionists after the Iron Curtain was brought down, and we were exposed to what they were doing over there.
It's absolutely amazing. You know, there's a whole podcast or two just about the whole Russian influence and the Russian Impressionism. And you're very fortunate because you have the Russian, the museum there in Minneapolis. I don't know how far away Minneapolis is from you.
Oh, it's just an hour.
Yeah, that little museum is one of the gems in America, and Ray Johnson's collection, which he rotates in and out of there, is just probably one of the 2 or 3 best Russian collections in the world.
Yes,
so,
and when I was in Russia, they knew of Minnesota because of that. Yeah, after I saw that exhibit, everything I could get my hands on with of Russian artists, and I did a trip to Russia and visited the home of Nikolai Fechin, which was a 10-hour train ride in the middle of the night in February, looking out the windows, east of Moscow, and then up to Repin's home and seeing the Archipovs and Gritseys and Polanov and all those guys that are and Sarovs. Seeing the originals and studying them was an amazing gift to me because it took me out of that dead end. So I think being open to those things that stir our soul is the way out of getting stuck. Like
I can remember you're talking about the influence of Russians. I took a group of people on art. We do Fine Art Connoisseur magazine has a cruise that we do every year, or a trip, and we took a group of people to Russia. And I had been to Russia previously, once or twice, and one particular artist, very well-known artist, went into the Russian museum and had never really seen these things in person. And I remember, tears came to his eyes, just like you said.
Oh.
And he said, I don't know if I can ever do this. And he really went into a funk as a result of it. But it challenged him, and he went from a moment where he said, I'm about to give up painting because I just can't possibly get to that level. And he just fought it and fought it and fought it and fought it for months. And then he called me and he said, I broke through. I can finally get closer. So I think that your message, I think if I just can reiterate that message, is that, we all need to get out and look at a lot of art, and we all need to look at what's stirring our souls and look at things that, go beyond the things that we've been told are great, but look for little gems. Russia is a great place to do it. I should mention that this is not official yet, but I'm working on a trip to Russia for fall of next year.
2017?
2017, yes.
Oh.
Yeah, and because a lot of people who missed the first Russian art cruise, we're not going to do a cruise, but we're going to do Moscow, St. Petersburg, etc. And working on it. It's not official yet, but that's going to be pretty cool.
Oh, I think I'll be there.
Oh, good.
Except I'm teaching a group in the Cinque Terre in September. That's why I was wondering. Oh gosh, I hope things line up.
You're teaching where?
Oh, in the Cinque Terre in Italy.
Oh, okay,
and
terrific.
Doing a workshop, in September.
Well, we'll have to talk sometime about that because I have so many great stories. I went over and visited probably 30 or 40 different artist studios in Moscow and St. Petersburg, mostly Moscow, and went into the inland to the academic Dasha. There was a little red building that was built by Catherine the Great, and she used it to build the canals. She had to have a place to stay when she was building the canals, and it's in the middle of the country, about 5 hours between Moscow and St. Petersburg. And we drove out there in the snow one morning, and here's this little building in the middle of nowhere, and you walk in, and there are paintings filling the walls from Repin and Levitan and Shishkin and all these greats. And it just was like this jewel in the middle of nowhere. Those paintings have since been stolen. No one knows where they are. They think they were taken by the local, by a local. I'll not get into the politics of it, but a local politician, and probably sold. But what a rare opportunity. So we'll have to have conversations about Russia in the future. Talk to me about truth and beauty, because I know that's important to you.
Well, I think, first of all, I think that we each have to decide what that means to us, because it can mean so many different things. And there are big debates going on what is truth and what is beauty, and have been since Socrates and Plato. But from all that being said, for me, I would say beauty is something that relates to balance and rhythm and harmony, and stirs and ennobles and uplifts us. And it's in the it's a subjective thing. It happens inside of us. It isn't that a thing or a scene or any subject is beautiful in and of itself. It's us, or I believe, I belong to the school of thought that believes that beauty is something that we carry with us. And it's there. All we need to do is recognize it, be open to it. We already have it because we carry it with us. We carry I remember painting a glass of water on the arm of a lawn chair, and weeping because it was so, as I was painting it, because it was so utterly beautiful, and laughing at myself, thinking, "Well, that's dumb, that's silly." But
you were weeping at your painting, or weeping at the scene?
As I was painting, as I was seeing the beauty in that little blue glass full of water, and weeping at the fact that there could be beauty in something so seemingly insignificant.
Well, I think that's a great workshop technique too, because I've often thought, a great tool for a workshop would be to plant everybody in the back alley of where the dumpsters are, and say, find beauty in this.
Yeah, exactly. I was at the PleinAir Duluth this last summer, and they had the quick paint at a skate park in an underpass, and everyone was livid. But I thought, oh my gosh, this is really cool. So I did a little painting called Under What's Over, and just some weeds in between growing out of the concrete with the overpass overhead. But I thought it was great structural rhythms and beautiful interplay of light and warms and cools. It's not about the subject. I think that's why I've never minded painting for other people and painting anything that comes across my path, because there's beauty in everything. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a really good point for everybody to understand too, because we are all seduced by travel and going to paint the most beautiful places on earth, and I know I am, and I love doing that, and that's very special for me. But I think to become a really good painter, you just need to be able to kind of plant yourself anywhere and find something and see what you can do with it.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard Sargent would do that. He'd go out in the middle of a field and just turn his easel around. Okay, I'll paint this now, and then pivot the easel again. Okay, I'll paint that now, and then I'll paint that now. And that's true. In the old days, 30 years ago, I would spend half the day looking for a worthy motif. And now I don't have to go more than 10 steps from my front door.
Yeah, I was in Florence, to speak at the opening of the Florence Academy recently, and I had some time to go out and paint, and I got in my car and I drove and drove and drove, and I ate up all my time looking for the most beautiful villa to paint. It's like every one was beautiful, but I was looking for the ultimate, and I burned a lot of time, so it's a disease. So Mary, what else is on your mind?
Well, I just read your letter to potential participants in the for the PleinAir convention in San Diego that's coming up.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you that I was very impressed with your tale of woe and inspiration on how you were troubled as a child that your art that was probably created during history class or something, I don't know, or math was being ridiculed by the teacher. And I thought, wow, how many people have had that experience? I know in fourth grade for me, we were supposed to be copying it was Halloween, and we were supposed to copy a little haunted house and paste little yellow windows out of construction paper on top of the black house, and then put the cat and the moon and the witch in front of the moon. Well, I thought it'd look really cool to cut out the windows and put a piece of yellow paper behind the black house and have the light kind of coming through the window. And so I turned it in, and I was all excited for the teacher to praise me and single me out. And she saw that, and she said, "Look, children, apparently there's only one person in the entire class that does not know how to follow directions." So, and I turned all red, and it was a horrible experience. And I just think of what a shame that is, that so often this creative spirit is squelched through the years. But the good news is that a true creative spirit finds its way out one way or another.
Well, I think that's probably true in most cases, but there are people who get those moments in their lives and it locks them up, and they're so afraid of criticism that they just don't take it any further. I was lucky to escape it. I had parents who pulled me out of it. They didn't even realize what went on, but and you were lucky to escape it too. But there are a lot of people who just, they get locked up. And, my goal with all of this, with the magazines and the convention and all the things that we do, is really to help people find painting, because, you look at the spirit of somebody like you, who has, first off, you've lived what appears to be a wonderful life as a painter. I'm sure you had your ups and downs just like everybody has, but you are filled with joy, and you're doing what you love, and you're passionate, and you're able to do it till the day that you can't do it anymore, unlike a lot of things. And so, you got 40 plus years in now, you probably get another 40 plus years in, and it just is, it's so life-changing. So I'm sending something out soon that is really talking about how to encourage people to paint, because I think if we can have more people find it, it's not about creating more professionals,
Yes.
more people selling paintings, but if that's what they want to do, that's fine. It's about really inspiring people who don't think they have it in them. I don't know about you, but when I'm out painting, I inevitably, if I'm in a public place, somebody walks up to me and they say, I wish I could do that, but I can't even draw a straight line. I don't have any talent. And whenever I hear those key words, I say, you know what? This is not about having talent. It's about learning a process. If you can learn to type or to cook or ride a bike, it's a process, and you can do this. And then I try to take their hand and show them a couple of things and get them into it. And then I usually point them to some place where they can learn, find an instructor or something. Because I think that we have all been given this gift, and we need to make sure that others find it as well.
I think it's wonderful what you're doing, Eric, and I think providing the warmth and support and empowerment to people who never thought they would be able to pick up a brush and sit in front of nature and make a picture is a tremendous thing. And also comparing it to golf, the new golf. I love that, because then we recognize people will recognize that it doesn't matter if you're not Tiger Woods. It's not about that. And they can kind of make that connection then that, well, it doesn't matter if I don't end up being a Da Vinci or a Richard Schmid or Dan Gerhardt's or Daniel Graves. It doesn't matter. It's about it's about something else. It's about getting what's inside out. And I think when we paint, we learn to become fully present in a way that many people can't when they try to meditate or when they try to find other ways to get in the zone. I think there's something about being out in nature that helps us to be fully present, and that's the key to becoming a great painter as well as just a Sunday painter. Feeling getting out in nature and feeling the ground and feeling the great relations in and among all these elements. It helps us feel those connections to the land, helps us get in the zone, and as we get in the zone, we relax and the cares of the day float away. And that's good for everyone. That's good for all of us.
You've really articulated something that I've been trying to articulate for a long time, and you did it beautifully. We spend most of our lives not painting. If you think about the total number of hours that we're awake, most of them are probably not painting for most of us. We're dealing with our families or our jobs or everything else. But once you become an artist, you see everything through the eyes of that artist. You're driving down the road and you're looking at the way the light is hitting a building or the way the clouds are rim lit, or even me looking out my window now at the color on the trees. Those kinds of things most people don't ever grasp or notice. And so the life of an artist really gives you the ability to see things differently. So you've articulated it beautifully.
It enriches our lives, no matter who we are. We can never look at the world the same way again once those light switches start going off.
So we're going to end this now, but if you have any more final thoughts for maybe somebody who's deciding to pick up painting, or somebody who's doing it now, maybe a little bit of encouragement or something else that you want to share?
Probably don't compare yourself with others. Be gentle and patient with yourself, and love the journey and appreciate the ability to even try to express what's inside in this wonderful medium of paint.
Well, you have really been one of my favorites so far in the podcast series.
Thank you.
Your sensitivities, your ability to express yourself. One thing I noticed in talking to you, something that I wrote down while we were talking, and that is study the classics. That's something that I never really got in my education, and I need to be studying Socrates. I need to reread Ruskin, a lot of things like that I think help us get beyond just the act of painting and get more into the heart of painting.
Yes. If we don't want to keep mimicking what everyone else is doing, we have to start going to different sources and finding what resonates with us on an intellectual level, and then go back into nature and find what resonates with us on a heart level.
Well, on that note, we'll say goodbye. Thank you so much, Mary. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Eric. It's a privilege.
Well, she is fabulous. Thanks again to Mary Pettis. She'll be on stage at the PleinAir Convention. This podcast is sponsored by the PleinAir Convention, held this April in San Diego. It has some of the most amazing artists in the world as faculty to teach you. It is the largest faculty of artists ever. And if you're a beginner learning to paint, or if you're an experienced pro, everybody is welcome. Everybody's equal. It's an amazing event. We go outdoors to paint together every day. If you don't know how to do that, we have a pre-convention basics workshop you can attend to learn how to go outdoors and paint. Even if you're a studio painter, you've been painting for years, taking it outdoors is completely different. And we have instruction on 4 stages indoors with big screens so you can see every detail, and lots of demonstrations from artists in oil, watercolor, acrylics, water-soluble oils, urban sketching, you name it. 4 stages, and there's a giant expo hall of goodies and art supplies. You can learn more at PleinAirConvention.com, and keep in mind that it probably is going to sell out soon, if it hasn't by the time you're listening to this. Today's interview was sponsored by Art Marketing in a Box, the complete system for artists who want to market but don't know what to do. You can learn more at artmarketinginabox.com. Well, plein air painting is red hot. That may be why Plein Air Magazine is doing so well. We're thankful to all of you for picking it up. #1 selling art magazine, representational magazine at Barnes & Noble. Drop by, pick one up, or you can get your own subscription for about half of what you pay on the newsstand at pleinairmagazine.com. This is always fun to talk to these artists. Let's do it again sometime, hopefully next week. We'll see you then. I am Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of Plein Air Magazine. And remember, it is a big, beautiful world out there that needs to be painted, so go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.